I want to begin by saying I'm enormously proud and happy to be here and grateful to be here. I want to thank the people who made this possible. Sitting here, it seems to me that it's like being at an enormous birthday party. You know, the kind of party where you recognize a few faces, but most of the people are strangers, and you circulate and you say, so how did you know Francisco? You know, what is your link? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and in fact, by talking a little bit about what it could mean for development to occur without ceilings and without walls, that's my title, I'm going to be showing a bit how I came to this particular party. I'm also going to offer some thoughts, not a lot, rather speculative, on the relationship between Francisco's approach, especially the Varela version, and my own. And finally, I'm going to touch on a couple of contemporary social issues that may be approaching their limits of conceptual coherence, and thereby presenting us with the question, what will happen if common understandings of life, of the body, and of the mind should actually change in the direction in which many of us have been advocating? So, roofs and walls first. Amy Cohen has written, quote, "An old friend of Francisco's once told me," now here's an embedded quote, "Francisco no tiene techo." He has no roof. I, Amy continues, always liked this metaphor because it invokes the notion of construction, but a paradoxical one. The foundations are there, the structural walls and the beams, but without a roof, it's unfinished and thus presents unlimited possibilities. It is exposed to the elements and thus necessitates inventiveness and flexibility. End of Amy's quote. I'd like you to keep these ideas in mind for the duration of the talk. Exposure, inventiveness, and flexibility. They bear on what I want to say about development sin techo. So, you'll notice that I made this roofless house even more odd, even more bizarre, by removing its wall. That's sin muro. I'm going to try and justify that move in a moment by distinguishing between the boundaries of the organism and those of its developmental system. But first I want to mention another sense of wall-lessness. Sometime after I had submitted the title for this talk, that I was committed to this title, I heard about a professor of environmental science who was embroiled in a tenure dispute. Apparently he still is. Some people claimed that he was paying for having criticized his university's lucrative intimacy with corporate biotechnology. Some of you may know this case in California. At one point, apparently, this embattled professor held office hours in the open on the university plaza. He contrasted this action with the secretiveness of the university during the tenure proceedings. But he also was dramatizing, I'm sure he understood, his impending loss of shelter. I was very moved by this gesture, and I appropriated that idea of office hours without walls to go with the one of Francisco without a roof over his head. So now I have this exceedingly bizarre and overloaded metaphor that I have to try to make a little bit of sense of for you. Think, like other boundaries, ceilings and walls are symbolically resonant. What do? They simultaneously indicate kinship and difference, inclusion and exclusion, containment, and escape. Think of the glass ceilings one hears about in the corporate world. That is, a level of advancement beyond which certain people seem not to be able to go. These are walls also. There are walls, visible or invisible, around neighborhoods. Real estate agents will talk about redlining a neighborhood, which is a socially very potent move. Or think of quarantine. In fact, the professor I'm alluding to was apparently a vocal critic of the massive planting of genetically modified corn in Mexico. And we had all been reassured that of course this corn would remain contained. It would never escape. But in real life, plants are not so easily contained, not so easily sequestered. The professor's office, in any case, when he set himself on that plaza, became coextensive with the plaza. Or you could say with the entire campus. Or you could say with the entire world. We could also say that we all have office hours and offices without walls. Indeed, careers without walls. Whatever our own tendencies may be to compartmentalize. What I mean, partly, is that once out there, our acts, our words, our writing can be used and misused in ways that we can't control. We are open, often in spite of ourselves, to a wide variety of influences. We make do in altered circumstances, and we change, again, often in spite of ourselves. So again, exposure, inventiveness, and flexibility. Although this professor's gesture was ingenious and provocative in its own context, office hours on the plaza then can simply be taken as life. We're here to celebrate Francisco's life, and after all, as Amy suggested in that passage that I quoted, his was a signal example of a life lived in constant challenge to limits and boundaries of all sorts. In the more general sense that I want to develop, however, there's a certain kind of unboundedness that characterizes the lives of all organisms, including ourselves. This isn't to say that possibilities are infinite. As hostile questioners often insist, an ant probably won't become an elephant, but that there is a way of conceptualizing these processes that does justice to the contingencies that we encounter and that doesn't perpetuate the kinds of problematic dualities that Stephen was alluding to and which I think will come up again and again in the next few days. I'm also thinking of the richly reciprocal exchanges between science and common understanding about which Evelyn Keller has written so insightfully, and to which, in fact, I'm going to return at the end. So, we not only celebrate Francisco's life, we can't help living it, perhaps in ways of which we're not aware, perhaps in ways that he wouldn't have been happy about, and in the same way we were present in his work. That said, then let me go on, and let me briefly at least sketch the framework on which and within which I've been working for the last several decades. And this is the developmental system. I would say that my work has often been about what you could call the politics of the boundary. And politics here, I mean very broadly, including many kinds of influence, but especially the power to define, to include, to exclude, to categorize. If you think about it, any theory legitimizes some entities and some distinctions while making others virtually unthinkable.